Good afternoon to you too. Everything is going great. Now we are here again to another amazing podcast. And welcome everybody who are joining today. We're going to talk about the recruitment in a post-pandemic world, and especially talking about remote working. So that's going to be very exciting. Please join us. We are also live streaming these on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. If you have questions, please feel free to do your questions at the end of the podcast. We are really happy to answer all of your questions. And then let's just make this 20 minutes podcast. Yeah. Let's just start by just asking you, as always, the expert, how actually remote work has impact on the recruitment strategies.
It's frustrating because everybody wants to be remote. And what it's happening right now, and I think we've talked about this a couple of times in some of the other podcasts, is employers want everybody back. Employees don't want to come back. So there has been a shift going back and forth where the employee had a ton of power and they were saying, we're going to work from home and you don't have a choice. And now the employer is starting to get some of their power back, and we're seeing a dramatic shift where we're not seeing a lot of remote positions being offered, and if they are, they're overseas. So whether they're going to be in South America, they're going to be in Asia, and I'm telling you right now, if what we're telling all of our candidates who are gung ho about being at home, you're not going to be paid the wages you're accustomed to because that is slowly going away. Now, this doesn't pertain to everybody, but I would say it's creeping towards over 50% with what we see anyway. If you want to be remote, be ready because your pay is going to get cut substantially. And the minimum expectation that we're seeing now is hybrid. So, for strategy purposes for us, we're just blatantly honest with all of our candidates. We tell them what to expect. We tell them, listen, you can get away with it for another year, maybe another 18 months, but just know that as of right now, the people that are paying your checks want you in the office. So honesty is what, if you're asking, the strategy is honesty. We just tell them this is what's out there. So
Yeah, interesting. And you're right. It's actually a very competitive world too in the remote arena too. And it's actually becoming something very important for companies too. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how companies are actually adapting the recruitment strategies or in general um, to remote and hybrid roles.
mhm. So all right. So when you say that, tell me, like, would you be a little more specific on what you mean by that? Because that can go a lot of different ways.
So I think it's more about, for example, let's say you have a recruitment job, right? A person is having a recruitment
Mhm,
job. That's something that can be done remote. But let's say you have a
mhm,
job that it has to be done in the physical way. You know, you have to go. How do you think companies
mhm.
should adapt to those type of jobs that are actually necessary to be there to become them remote? Because it's something that is happening right now, where people are not working because they just want it to be remote. So how do you think companies are actually changing that?
What they're doing is, from what we've seen anyway. So if we're they're finding that people don't want to come into the office for that position, they're going to say, okay, so they're looking now at how can I make that more cost effective, and I can go South America and get that same person for 60 cents on the dollar. I can go to Asia and get that person for 40 cents on the dollar. So then they start asking themselves, how good is this employee that I have that never comes into the office? And can I get two of them for the price of one? So a lot of that's what's coming down to. So it's when and now there's some jobs that when we say remote, when we talk about remote, it's I'm sitting at my house and doing something on the computer where I could be doing that in an office setting. And then we've got some clients whose jobs are to be on the road. That's different. That's not a remote job. That's an in the field job. They may not go to the office very often, and that their job is to be either client facing or on site. We have one client that does service technician roles. They don't have an office. They're just going from client office to client office. You can call that remote, but we would call that in the field. So that might be a little bit different.
Zia, we have a question that I want to ask you right now. And Bria is asking, hi, Zia and Aleja. We are currently struggling here in Denmark with remote work. I am assuming during COVID you work from home. What was the biggest challenge you faced with remote work and what did you miss most of being on site?
Oh, that's easy. So I worked from home for a little bit, and I'll tell you, I loved not sitting in traffic. That was, man, that was amazing. I loved not sitting in traffic. But what you lose is development of professional development, cultural development, growing your team. Because I feel like the longer you're with somebody, it's like a family. And what you're not getting is you're not getting that camaraderie. You're not building that team. You're not. All your. It's almost like a hired gun that you've created versus like a family. Like, and I hate using the word as family because it's not really family, but it almost feels like a lot of these people like I work with, they're like my brothers or my sisters, like you feel that way and you don't have that remotely. And there is no replacement for it. So when people ask like, what did we lose? You lose cohesion. You lose collective thoughts. Because a lot of times if we're not doing this, then there is no teamwork. And there's something to be said when one of my guys can just walk into my office, sit down, like, hey, I have like, how do I do this? Hey, this person just said this to me on the phone. I can hear them on the phones with conversations with clients, and I can walk out there and be like, hey, try this instead. You can't do that remotely. It's a lot more failing without the guidance to get better. And what we realized and what we quickly pivoted to get everybody back as soon as possible is we realized our performers were not performing nearly at that level we expected them to. Our young talent wasn't developing nearly as fast as they were. People were regressing. And that's not a culture that we wanted. And it also wasn't a culture that was sustainable. So you're going to see a lot of this pivot going back is what did we miss? We missed growing. We missed being great because we weren't getting that.
That's true. And I think from my personal experience, I think you got to be very organized while you are remote. That you have to have a sense of,
Mm-hmm.
understanding your timing, get up early, doing everything as you were in an office because it's important. There's so many distractions when you are at home. So it's so important to have those, like prepare. But I think you're right. Yesterday when we were, working with one of our coworkers, Gabi, we were saying that some of the things that we miss too when we are online is, for example, doing some company outings, just going together for lunch like we did yesterday, having like you said, just walking through the desk to somebody because it's super close rather than just waiting for a call, waiting for a meeting. So it's something that I really miss that too, but I think it's important to be organized. It has its benefits and disadvantages as well, but I think it's a matter of also organization. And Brinja says to you, Sia, I also love the Wolf of Wall Street portrait. That got me into sales. Awesome. Thank you for your questions.
It's
Now let's
there are
ask
a lot
you.
of things you shouldn't do. Yeah, there's a lot of things you shouldn't do that he did, but there's a lot
Yeah,
of the attitude of. It was a great movie. If you're in sales, it's a great movie.
yeah,
That's all I'm gonna say.
I agree. Now, I want to ask you the other questions that we have, and it's more about what do you think is the impact of remote work on candidates' expectations and employer offerings? For example, like you were saying, we were losing kind of, um, expectations in terms of when we were together we used to have more interactions and everything, and that'll be, let's say, one expectation from one person. But now that it's remote, what do you
Mhm.
think will be the other expectations?
I would say expectations. Number one expectation is a cut in pay. I would also say you're going to move down the list of promotable assets. They'll see you more as a asset or a, I don't want to say this nicely, you are more of a disposable asset than a developmental asset at a company. So things to expect, like just for example, one of my good friends works for Disney, and Disney will flat out tell you if you come into the office, we will pay you 20% more. That couldn't be any more. I mean, you can't make it any more obvious than that. They want you in the office. Now, sometimes, listen, at the end of the day, your office may not be close, so you have to make the decision of do I want to move or do I want to or do I want to find a different place to work? Those are all decisions you're going to have to make. I know when things went remote, a lot of people sold their homes and moved to cheaper parts of the world because they're like, wait a second, I can get the same pay and work at a place where the cost of living is lower. And now, things have changed. A lot of people did that in California. They moved to Texas in the middle of the pandemic, and then they're like, hey, we need you guys back. And they're like, we don't we don't live close. Decisions that people make, you gotta kind of have to deal with them now. But yeah, it's one of those things is right now the expectation right. So I would tell everybody, be very mindful of the decisions you make, what you decide to do next. And I'm sure everybody's been watching the news with the economies. There's a lot of talk about possible recession, and the first people they're going to cut are the ones they don't see. So be very, very careful with the decisions you make in life. They could come back and get you.
Thank you, Sia. Now, let's just talk about how organizations can build a more adaptable and agile workplace. You were talking about this sometimes, that when remote can delay some stuff. So how can we build a more adaptable and agile workplace to better navigate this type of future crisis? We navigated with the pandemic, but let's say we have another pandemic. What do you think, like some strategies or something that we have done in the past that it can help for the future crisis?
I think as a whole, we showed how quickly we can get to about 60% productivity with, I don't want to say the creation because it's been around, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Google Meet. You've got, who's the other, Zoom. The platforms are there. And I think we'll be able to adapt much faster. The problem that you're going to run into is, depending on the industry, is how much does that hurt you? And a lot of that's going to come down to, it's going to be very specific to the industry that you're in on how agile you can be. If you're in a customer facing position, a pandemic's not going to be good for you. It's just that's just, it's going to hurt you. And depending on your agility, it's what is your backup plan. A company that I worked at before, they completely pivoted what they were making to go into the CCC, or not the what was it? They made COVID products. They just pivoted directly and they started making COVID products, and that was the only way they can do it. There was a cruise line that pivoted from cruises to cargo, strictly so they can just continue to produce. Because otherwise, your boat's sitting on shore. You're not getting any. Tax breaks because they're not American. They're not in America. They're all in like tax free countries. So you have to be very, very careful. So with being agile, you have to be able to pick up and move to a different segment, a different industry. You have to be able to do something differently to stay afloat. And I know in our world, it's pretty simple. If one company stops hiring, another one is. So we're on the lookout to see, like, who is hiring, what do they need, and how can we go find those people for them. So it's really all about being able to adapt. A lot of the agility is not being constricted by corporate red tape, and there's a lot of that. You'll see bigger companies have a very tough time um, steering because they have to get so many lines of approval. There's so many moving pieces. For us, we're a relatively nimble company. If we need to make a pivot, we make the pivot within 24 hours. We're ready to rock and roll.
Zia, thank you so much. And we do have some questions from the audience as well. Natalia is
Sure.
asking, how will you motivate remote workers right now or remote work generations to come back to the office?
Well, I mean, the old saying is the stick or the carrot, right? Um, what you do is you motivate them with, first you have to find out what motivates individuals. Sometimes that's money, sometimes it's promotion, sometimes you have to find out what it is for each person, and you can either motivate them to come back or you look to replace them. And if your strategy is to come back, it's either a stick or carrot. We either give you the carrot with more money and like, hey, come in, and if you realize, hey, they're just not going to do it, and that's going to be your policy moving forward, you've just got to look to replace them. It's sad
Jessica
to
is
say, but at the end of
asking,
the yeah, at the end of it, it's sad
yeah,
to say it like that, but it's really what it is.
it's okay. Now, Jessica is asking, what was the biggest challenge you have seen in hiring since the pandemic started?
Um, in hiring, we've seen. Who I think this has hurt the most is the new workforce. the ones who were in college for COVID, the ones who were, learning remotely, what we notice is their social skills are, I don't want to say on par, but they're lacking. And a lot of that is because, they sat in front of a computer. They didn't have the interactions with their classmates, with their teachers, with their just walking around campus. They had a lot of that was mitigated. So what we see is they don't have the skill sets of, they're very poor interviewers, like very poor interviewers. They may be really smart, but you never believe it by talking to them because it's very uncomfortable. They don't have that. So one thing that I would tell everybody is to take either a Toastmasters class, start a conversation in an elevator, get more comfortable talking, because what do they say? Information without communication is useless, right? So you may know how to do everything, but if you can't tell anybody what you can do, you're never going to get that. So we're seeing that a lot with the younger ones is they're missing something. They're missing that ability to communicate.
Mike is asking something about what you talked earlier, and is that idea of the family type of thing, you know? So he's
Mhm.
asking, how can companies keep a good team spirit with people working both in office and at home? And I think this is actually a good question because personally, I have leave, and sometimes you see, that people at the office do more, for example, together than with the remote people, and then they kind of feel disadvantaged or things like that. So how do you think they can keep that good spirit?
That is very, very, very good question that I don't have a great answer for. Only because how do you do that? We've tried a what is it, a remote happy hour? That was awful. Those are dreadful. Like nobody wants to be on those. They're like, just leave us alone. I think what you do is you try to promote such a healthy, fun, cultural aspect of being in the office that the people that are not in the office kind of get FOMO. Like they're like, wait a second, I feel like I'm missing something. That way, you encourage them to want to come in. Like I know we've got a guy who works up in Jacksonville, and we try to bring him down or have him want to come down like every, let's say, 3 times every 2 months or 2 times every 3 months. Just we try to bring him down as often as possible so he feels like he's part of the team. And whenever he comes down here, we try to do some sort of like build team building event. We went to Top Golf last time. We've done a home run derby, which I'm sure if you guys follow us on LinkedIn, you've seen the videos of my car windshield breaking. We try to do different things and we try to have a good time. So that way it promotes like a healthy office atmosphere because you don't want to force them back. You want them to want to come back. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Now, we have a question from Samantha, and she's asking, what are some problems companies face when hiring for remote jobs, and how can you fix them?
Uh, so if you're looking at Asia and specifically in India, you have to be very, very careful because you're going to have this unbelievable interview where it's like a rock star. They do everything you want. You're like, oh my God, how do we find this guy? And then what you find out is the person that shows up to work isn't the same person. So if you're hiring in Asia, please do not do that on your own. Please work with a recruitment company. We vet them extensively to prevent that because it's happened to everybody in the past. And one thing we do is we make sure we take IDs up front. We do all video on. There's no such thing as a camera off meeting with us. And we take screenshots every time we meet with them just to make sure the same person is showing up to the interview, as well as when they start working for you, the picture doesn't change. So be very, very careful of remote work. You never know who's going to show up.
Please contact CTI Staffing for that. Now, we have the last
Correct.
questions to wrap up this amazing 20 minutes podcast, yeah. And the question is from Emily, and she's asking, how is technology changing hiring? And what do you think are the best tools for recruiters nowadays?
So technology is changing so quickly that we're jumping on board as quickly as possible as well. We're investing in AI and we're investing in automation, especially because we have some clients that don't need one position. They'll need 100 positions filled, 500 positions filled. And when you run into something like that, I can either go out and hire 50 to 100 more recruiters, or what we can do is take the recruiters that we have and make them 500 times more productive. because at the end of the day, they're going to make more money, which is really what we want. We want everybody at our company to be successful. So what we're doing is we're dipping into technology as much as we can to make things more automated, to make things more efficient, thus making everybody wealthier, which is what we really want. So I would tell you, if your toilet's broken, you call a plumber. If you want a great meal, you go to a five-star restaurant. Please, if you need help, ask for it. Don't try to do something that is not your specialty. We see this like right now. Like I was talking to an attorney friend of mine, and he was talking about, he's like, I'm having a tough time hiring. I'm like, because that's not what you do. You're an attorney. You're a great attorney. You're not good at hiring. That's not what that's what I do. And I tell everybody it's the same thing. Just if you focus on what you're great at and bring people in to do the things that you're not great at. Kind of back to one of my favorite books. I read this thing like 20 years ago, and I always pivot back to it. It's you find out what you're great at and you do it. You find out the things you're not great at and have somebody who is great do it. Like, and that's a simple, like in sales, this is one of my favorite things. I talk to sales organizations all the time, and they're all telling me, oh, we're looking for a salesperson. All right, well, what are you looking for? I'm like, oh, they got to get appointments. I'm like, then you're not looking for a salesperson. You're looking for an appointment setter. I'm like, don't confuse the two. They're two completely different people. Somebody that can walk into an appointment and close it is a salesperson. Somebody who, but the problem is that person may not be great at setting appointments. Focus on people's strengths, and you're going to get so much more out of them. So that I hope I answered your question. But how to use AI? Use it to become more efficient. Use it to become more profitable. You use technology. It is huge. What tools I would tell them to use would be CTI staffing.
I totally agree with you. And thank you so much, Sia, as always, to giving us your advice and everything about, stuffing and sales and leadership and everything. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And the next Wednesday, next Wednesday, we're going to have another person to invite it to our podcast. We're going to be with Joseph Musa, our VP of Sales, and Brittany Story. She is the HR director of Pearson. She also has experience on staffing and recruitment. It'll be really good if you can join us back again. We're going to have some questions for her. So please stay tuned. Follow us on our social media. We are always posting about our podcast. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And thank you so much, Sia.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.